Good evening. Welcome to ITV News London. They suffered years of abuse at the hands of the people who were supposed to be protecting them. And decades on, the victims of child abuse in Lambeth's children's homes are not only living with the emotional trauma of what happened to them, but having to fight to be compensated fairly. A lawyer representing hundreds of claimants has told ITV News London why he is demanding an independent inquiry into claims that black victims and white victims aren't being compensated equally, claims Lambeth Council denies. Our senior correspondent Ron K. Phillips has our top story.
Yes, abused or raped or whatever it was by the staff.
He spent more than 5 years of his childhood in Lambeth-run care homes, but he wasn't looked after. From the age of 10, he was sexually abused by at least 5 different members of staff.
More than 5. My social worker, St Thomas Moors, Red Hill, Eastbourne, Shirley Oaks and Southville. I think about 6 or 7 people. 2 of them was women.
Now in his early 60s, this man, whose identity we have concealed, is one of hundreds claiming compensation from the Lambeth Redress Scheme. The council, which was at the centre of one of the capital's worst child abuse scandals, set aside more than £100 million for children who suffered abuse in its care homes. But groups supporting the victims say the scheme discriminates against black claimants.
Well, it's clear for us. We've got all the figures. We know what compensation has been paid to our members, and it's clear that black residents and survivors are getting paid less. It's just a factual matrix. We can see, we've seen the figures, we can demonstrate it, and we've explained this to the council.
And this prominent lawyer says black victims are also at a disadvantage because assessors are reducing compensation for victims whose parents were diagnosed with a mental illness.
Because of racism, many black parents were assumed to have a mental illness, and their children are then assumed now to have a mental illness because of their parents, not because of the trauma that they suffered in Lambeth homes.
So, and there is another way in which the black applicants are being discriminated against?
Well, because of racism, black children were not expected to achieve educationally and therefore would not get a successful career and therefore would get less compensation than their white applicants.
This man has been offered £125,000 in compensation for abuse which started when he was in a nursery run by Lambeth and continued when he was sent to Shirley Oaks in Croydon. He says it's not nearly enough.
I feel as if there's not enough compensation for the mental abuse alone in my head for so many years, for, 30, 40 odd years.
These victims say they just want to be dealt with fairly. The compensation money will never wipe away the memories of what they've suffered, but knowing they're being discriminated against because of their race makes it worse. Ron K. Phillips, ITV News.
Well, in a statement, Lambeth Council said it is recognised that racist attitudes were widespread in Lambeth's former homes, but it is untrue to say that black applicants are not being adequately compensated. They say all compensation payouts are based on precedents derived from settled common law principles. The redress scheme also has an independent panel to review compensation awards. Next tonight, police are warning Londoners against taking any illegal substances after a woman died from eating a cannabis sweet. The 23-year-old from Ilford ate one of the sweets known as a gummy and was taken to hospital where she died. Her friend was also taken to hospital but survived. Well, Anton Allen is here with me now. Anton, what do we know about what happened?
Well, on the 29th of March, a yet-to-be-named woman purchased what she thought to be cannabis sweets, also known as gummies. Her and her 21-year-old friend ate one of those sweets, but they immediately felt unwell and called the police and the emergency services. But sadly, she lost her life on the 2nd of April and her friend has been discharged from hospital. A man has been charged now by the police. But in terms of the investigation, of course, they'll be looking into where these sweets actually came from. The second woman discharged and the man who's been charged, the Met said that the case could be linked to another incident that happened in March in Tower Hamlets, where another woman also fell ill.
Why are police especially concerned about this?
Well, these particular drugs look like sweets, so they can be accidentally taken by someone who's not particularly trying to take drugs at that particular time. So they're particularly dangerous for that reason. They come in packaging that looks like sweets as well. So the Met are particularly looking to find out where they've come from, and their investigations have yet not defined where they've come from. So they're looking to find out where they can get these drinks and get them off the streets.
Antoine, thank you very much. The man who was housing minister just before the Grenfell Tower fire didn't reply to letters warning of inadequate fire safety regulations. More than half a dozen of them came from the late MP Sir David Amess. To date, the inquiry into the fire heard how Gavin Barwell ignored his messages. Rags Martel has been listening to the hearing.
I do solemnly...
He was warned about fire safety before Grenfell.
...shall be the truth.
Gavin, now Lord Barwell, was the government minister responsible for housing the year the fire happened. In the days after the tragedy, he stayed silent.
Why did you sit on the fire report? I can't comment, I'm afraid. Could the deaths at Grenfell have been avoided?
Key to his role before Grenfell, the many warnings he was given by a group of MPs. Headed by the late Sir David Amess, the all-party parliamentary group on fire safety known as the APPG sent Barwell a total of 7 letters warning him that fire regulations needed to be made safer. Lord Barwell never replied.
I mean, obviously, very tragically, David is no longer with us. But one of the things that I think is probably worth saying, just to help the chair and the panel in appreciating this APPG correspondence, which I think is a very important, it's kind of a warning that was missed in this process. There were clearly problems with the department's system for handling correspondence. I think the PPG writes to me a total of 7 times, and I only ever see 3 of those letters. Yeah. So 4 of them just go missing.
Lord Barwell told the inquiry he had planned to meet Sir David Amess about his fire safety concerns in person, but a general election was called and the meeting never happened. But he did admit the government underestimated fire safety concerns before Grenfell.
The government had a completely false picture of the level of fire safety, but it wasn't just the government. This wasn't an issue that was being raised by the opposition. With the exception of the APPG, it wasn't being raised by backbench MPs. I wasn't being asked about it in Parliament. I wasn't being asked about it by the media.
Tomorrow, the most senior politician to appear at the inquiry, Eric Pickles, the then Secretary of State for Housing, will give his evidence. Rags Martel, ITV News, at the Grenfell inquiry.
Meanwhile, the house builders Crest Nicholson and Taylor Wimpey have revealed further hefty bills after vowing to carry out more fire safety works on tall buildings in the wake of the Grenfell Tower fire. The firms are among those to sign up to the government's new building safety pledge. Both companies say they expect to spend another £80 million on top of what they've already spent on cladding works. Stansted Airport is expecting this holiday to be its busiest time since before the pandemic. And to give you an idea of just how busy, last year around 8,000 people used the airport over the Easter weekend. This year they're expecting 240,000. With that steep rise in passengers plus staff shortages, airlines like British Airways and EasyJet have been forced to cancel flights. We asked Charlie Frost if the airport was prepared.
Well, they say they are. They say they're prepared and that they're coping. But I do think the demand to travel this Easter has been much higher than they anticipated. Remember, this is the first school holidays that we've been able to travel with no restrictions, at least on this side of your journey, for the last 2 years. And I must say, I've been reporting from Stansted throughout the pandemic on the differing travel restrictions. And of course, today was the busiest I've seen it. But that maybe it's just back to normal. Stansted is expecting 1.3 million passengers to pass through the terminal over the next 2 weeks. Phil Johnson was one of those. He flew to Greece this morning.
We arrived more than 3 hours before our flight. We arrived at 5:30 this morning. The queues were quickly up to the doors, the entrance door. The poor staff seemed to be overwhelmed by the sheer numbers of people. People were getting tetchy, they were getting anxious. Some people were trying to bust through the queue. A couple of people did queue jump.
So Phil had quite a difficult experience, but it did seem to be a lot calmer by this afternoon, as passengers told me.
It's been more busy than the previous time we went here, a lot more crowd here, but still took us only like 10-15 minutes to get through the queue, so it's fine.
Well, we literally just walked in. It looks a little bit busier than normal, but we're going to head straight through to the departures and enjoy our holiday.
Fingers crossed.
That's why we're here 2 hours early. As soon as it opens, we've come just to put our bags in. But it's fine, it's not that busy.
And it has to be said that the scenes at Stansted don't really seem to be comparable to some of those chaotic pictures that we've seen coming out of other airports over the last few days. But it is still experiencing some of the same issues that are causing some disruptions. So, as I said, that surge in demand and then having to re-recruit after 2 years of practically no flights, and then these new recruits then having to go through quite strict security checks to then work at an airport, and then also needing training up, which takes time, and then of course COVID. There is still some staff sickness hanging around, but to try to alleviate some of the issues this Easter, the airport is asking passengers to arrive in plenty of time before their flight, and they're expecting passenger numbers to be back up to pre-pandemic levels by summer, when they're hoping to be fully staffed again too.
Charlie Frost reporting there from Stansted. And we're being warned of closures to some tube lines over Easter. There'll be no trains on the Hammersmith and City line and parts of the District line from Good Friday to Easter Monday. And that's to allow the removal of a disused ticket hall at Whitechapel. Some sections of the Piccadilly line will also be closed for engineering work. A grandmother has told ITV News that she's still waiting for her Ukrainian daughter to join her from Poland, despite the Home Office insisting they've issued a visa. Nina Rivner says she has been paying for a rented room for her daughter and granddaughter in Hendon for weeks. Under the Ukraine family scheme, those fleeing the war are eligible for a UK visa if they are joining a family member based here. The Home Office says they issued a visa on April the 1st, but as yet, Nina and her family have had nothing and remain separated. Helen Keenan has more.
So this is the room?
Yes, this is a room for my girls. Prepare for my girls, my lovely girls.
She's had their room ready for weeks, but Nina is still waiting for her family to arrive from Poland after fleeing Ukraine. Her granddaughter Sophia's visa has been approved, but her daughter Svetlana still hasn't heard.
Of course, I'm so worried about it. But I hope it's maybe maximum all week, I think, maximum 1 week, and they come in maximum 1 week, but passing 4 weeks and they wait till now.
Nina rents a room in this house in Hendon. She's been paying for another for her relatives, thinking they would be arriving soon.
I prepare for them room and they close to me, and this is important.
How are you staying strong?
Yeah, I have to be strong. I have to be strong because I know if I'm not help them, who is going to help them?
Under the Ukraine family scheme, those fleeing the war are eligible for a UK visa if they're joining a family member based in the country. ITV London contacted the Home Office today. They told us Nina's daughter's visa was approved on the 1st of April and the confirmation could take up to 48 hours. But neither Nina or her family have received anything yet.
Don't cry. Yeah, I'm crying a lot, but when you come here, I'm stopped to cry. But now I can't. I wait you and I want to hug you. When I hug you, after I stop to cry.
For now, their daily calls keep them going as they wait anxiously to find out when they will be reunited. Helen Keenan, ITV News.
My guest tonight can usually be found giving makeovers to celebrities, including the stars of Bollywood. But this Ramadan, Kaniz Ali is doing something very different. She's visiting war-torn countries to hand out food and aid to those in need. And Kaniz joins me now from Lebanon, near the border with Syria. Hello, Kaniz. How are you?
Hi, I'm good. Thank you. Thanks.
So at the moment you're in Lebanon, aren't you? But you have been travelling around. You've been on the border with the Palestinian territories and also in Iraq. Tell us about the work you're doing in those places.
Yes, I've just flown from Iraq. At the moment, I was in the war-torn city of Mosul. I'm with the Deputy CEO of Human Relief Foundation, and we're distributing aid, emergency food aid on the ground, as well as medical aid for the less fortunate in all these camps.
What kind of response are you getting from the people that you're handing out this aid to?
We're getting hundreds and hundreds of people just rushing in for the food, and they're very, very, very happy. They haven't eaten in days. They really lack the basic necessities. And then we've got so many that still need a lot of aid and a lot of food as well.
I suppose one of the awful things, particularly with Syrians, is that the war and the conflict has been going on for so long in some parts that we don't talk about it nearly as much as we should do. Do some of the people there feel forgotten, do you think?
Yes, they do. They do. They feel very sort of forgotten, neglected. I've been coming for the past 5 years on the ground, and they're so thankful that, we've come back each year and that we're remembering them. And yeah, they do feel forgotten. They feel like ever since the war's kind of stopped post-war, the struggles are really, really hard, and not very many NGOs come down on the ground to help them.
You're doing this during Ramadan, aren't you, Kaniz? Because giving like this is such an important part of your holy month.
Yes, that's right. It's right. Ramadan is all about giving. It's all about getting closer to faith. It's one of the most important months in the Islamic calendar.
Kaniz, really wonderful to speak to you and hear about the work you're doing. Thank you so much for joining us there from Lebanon.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Duncan.
Now to a Londoner who has starred in the iconic West End production Hamilton and why she's changing her tune. Rachel John is fulfilling a lifelong dream, returning to her roots to record a gospel music album. And it's the album launch this evening in Tooting Bec, where Sam Holder is for us this evening. Hello, Sam.
Hi, Duncan. Look, if you've seen any of the big West End musicals over the past 15 years or so, you'll have seen Rachel John because she's been in almost everything. Hamilton, as you mentioned, We Will Rock You, but tonight it's all about her gospel debut. And what better way to kick off than with some live music? So, channeling my inner Jules Holland, Rachel John, take it away. Rachel, that was absolutely incredible. Wow, wow. We're so privileged to see that. My first question for you is, you've been in so many West End hits. What made you swap those stages for, I guess, the spiritual stage?
I think I've never left the spiritual stage. So it normally amounts to 6 days a week on stage and then a Sunday in a choir or doing worship at church. So this is where I'm at home. This is the music I grew up with.
And how long have you been planning to do a gospel album for?
Probably about 10 years. I've always wanted to do it. I grew up in this church, actually. It's the first church Mummy attended when she came here in the 70s. And so this just felt like the most natural music to do if the debut album was going to come out, and here we are.
Gospel is a huge industry in America. Some of the artists sell millions and millions of records. Not quite as big here. Why do you think that is?
I think the market's different. I think definitely in America you have a bigger market for it. You've got the Dove Awards, you've got, you know, amazing hymnists like the Gaithers and things like that. But you have had, especially at the wedding, you had the Kingdom Choir. So, you know, gospel music is here and it's always been here. Rich, I mean, you can hear it today. We've got incredible talent in this country.
So are you hoping to convert non-gospel listeners with this album?
Absolutely. I think for me, you know, I'm a lovely, you know, I love football and hymns are sung at football. So lots of teams have appropriated hymns. So hymns are in British culture. So, yeah, it's great.
You've had an amazing West End career. What are some of the roles or experiences that have really stood out for you?
I think definitely has to be, my first show was Lion King, so that was life-changing, and then Hamilton recently was just a wonderful, incredible project to be a part of.
Yeah, I mean, it was such a huge show. What was it like? I mean, the hype was unbelievable.
It was, and I think for us, we kind of came into it going, we were lovers of the music first. I was a lover of the music first. And then I just thought this is the opportunity to do something where diversity is rich on stage, the genres of music that we grew up in. I grew up in East London. I know that music well. So that was the opportunity to kind of share that with a theatre-going audience. So, yeah.
And did you get to meet Lin-Manuel Miranda?
I did. He's lovely. I think he's incredibly talented, really supportive of the show, and I'm just glad that he gave us the opportunity to do it because it did well, and it's still doing very well.
You've said a gospel album was one of your lifelong dreams. Yeah. Quickly, are there any lifelong dreams left in terms of theatre roles?
Oh, absolutely. There are a few out there, not that I want to talk about, but, you know, it's, you know, there are lots of projects bubbling around at the moment, so let's see. Let's watch this space and see what comes out.
Well, Rachel, thank you so much, and thanks for that incredible performance and your whole band. Rachel's album comes out on Friday.
Oh, Sam, we needed that. Thank you to Rachel. Now, Charles Dickens' novels have been read and loved around the world, and it was his first, The Pickwick Papers, which began life not far from here, where we're based, in a house in Bloomsbury. The illustrations for The Pickwick Papers helped it achieve phenomenal success, and today at 48 Dirty Street, the house which is now the Charles Dickens Museum, there's an exhibition about the novel that propelled Dickens to the big time Martin Stew has been to see.
So through here is the exhibition space.
Following in the footsteps of a London literary icon.
Talk a little bit more about the history of the Pickwick Papers.
Okay. Celebrating the book which first made Charles Dickens a star.
So this is really exciting. This is actually an original manuscript page from the Pickwick Papers. We learn a lot about London. Historians will actually read Dickens' novels to kind of get a feel for what it would have been like to live in the 19th century in Dickens' period. You know, when we think of the Victorian period, a lot of people think of kind of Dickensian London. So he really is synonymous with the time.
It all started with this novel, which paid for this house.
When they first published it, the first monthly part, they sold about 400 copies. By the end, they sold 40,000 copies each month. So this was a massive jettison into international fame for Charles Dickens.
It was translated around the world.
So this is dedicated more to Moronjune's own illustrations.
These sketches by an Italian artist show how the characters were imagined around Europe.
Down this end is when we talk more about Pickwick clubs.
In London, the book won a cult following.
So this here is a Pickwick Club minute book from 1837. There were lots of fan clubs that got set up in honour of the work. They named themselves after Dickens' characters, so you've got Snodgrass, Mr Pickwick all featured.
And from the look of the handwriting, they were having a good time whilst discussing
They were. So you can see that the more and more they were talking, there's a couple of nice kind of drink stains on this particular page, the more unsteady the handwriting comes as well.
School kids these days may be more familiar with Mr Scrooge than Mr Snodgrass, but Dickens' dynasty started right here.
So he's still inspiring people now?
He is.
Martin Stew, ITV News.
Sport now, and Arsenal defender Leah Williamson has been named as England's captain for this summer European Championships. The Lionesses open their Women's Euro campaign against Austria on July the 6th. Williamson has called it an incredibly proud moment for her and her family. On to the weather now with Holly.
Making the most of it, whatever the weather.
Octopus Energy sponsors ITV London weekday weather.
Good evening. We've had some sunshine at times today, mild air in place, but I'm afraid today was the best day of the next few because the winds are picking up tomorrow and Thursday. We've got showers and longer spells of rain. There will still be some brightness at times, but also our temperatures are taking a tumble. So at the moment, we're in a mild air mass. Now, into tomorrow, around this low, we've got some heavy, potentially thundery, blustery showers feeding our way. To start Thursday, it could be wet thanks to this feature here. That does clear through, but look at this. You'll notice those blue colours, that colder air mass taking charge for the end of the week. Possibly some wintry showers, but there is still uncertainty, I have to say, about the detail. But also, I think the risk of some colder nights to come later in the week as well. So at the moment, some cloud around. It will come and go a bit as we head through the night tonight. Towards the tail end of the night, though, it thickens further thanks to a weak weather front. It just brings a little bit of patchy rain, really, but it does lead to quite a different day for tomorrow.
I said keep your chicks warm.
Some sunshine around at times, but showers
in just a moment after the break. The ITV evening news continues here.
For now, though, from all of us, let's go while we still can. Have a great evening. Bye-bye.
I'll see you later. Bye-bye.
These showers as well. Away from them, some sunshine to be had, but temperatures are lower than today, and when you factor in the wind and those showers, it will feel, I think, like a pretty different sort of a day. And then
this is a party election broadcast by the Labour Party.
That tends to clear through, but we have got this colder air mass in place as we head through the tail end of the week. Potentially some showers, possibly something a bit wintry in nature, but still some uncertainty.
It's a hard time for working people. Prices are up at the petrol pump, at the shops and on household bills.
ITV London,
the biggest drop in living standards for 70 years. In times like these, people need a government.
And that is it for now. Mary is here next with the ITV Evening News. But from me and the rest of the London team, it's good to be back. Thank you for watching. We'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.
This is